After my husband beat me, I went to bed without a word. The next morning, he woke up to the smell of pancakes and saw the table filled with all kinds of treats. He said, "Good, you finally understood." But when he saw who was sitting at the table, his expression changed instantly. "Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story." The clock on the nightstand glowed 3:17 a.m. in soft red digits. It was the only light in the master bedroom, cutting through the heavy silence. I lay perfectly still, one hand pressed to my left cheek. The heat of Clyde's slap still radiated there, a small, furious sun beneath my skin. I could feel the swelling rising already, the tender skin tightening with every beat of my heart. The house was quiet, save for the low mechanical hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of old beams settling in the cool night air. I stared at the ceiling fan, its blades motionless, and tried to count the dust motes caught in the dim glow from the street lamp outside. Counting helped. It gave me something small and pointless to focus on instead of the metallic taste of fear that coated my tongue. Clyde had retreated to the guest room an hour earlier. I had listened to the floorboards protest under his heavy, self-pitying steps, the door slamming with that finality he always used, then the muffled thump of his body hitting the mattress. Soon, the snoring started. It used to feel protective, that deep rumbling sound, back when we were newlyweds. Now, it was just a warning bell that told me how long I had to move before he woke up. I waited until the sound became steady, a rhythm that was all his own, before I slipped from the bed. Bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, I moved in slow motion. The air was cool, I could feel gooseflesh rise on my arms beneath the thin cotton of my nightgown. I closed the bathroom door with a soft click and flipped on the light. The mirror was merciless. The bruise was already a deep plum color, shaped exactly like the impact of his hand, swelling right across my cheekbone. I tilted my head left, then right, studying it the way a scientist studies a specimen. Evidence. That's all it was now. I opened the camera app on my phone, turned off the flash, I didn't want to wake anyone, especially not him, and took 7 photos from different angles. The timestamps read 3:29 a.m. I emailed them to myself first, then to Phoebe, my best friend since college, and to a new folder on my hard drive labeled, simply, for when I'm ready. Then came the hard part. The plan. I opened the Notes app. I didn't want any hesitation, not a moment of doubt to creep in later. I typed it out. Call Phoebe at 5:00 a.m. Call non-emergency police at 5:30 a.m. Urgent care opens at 7 a.m. Go before work. Do not speak to Clyde until officers arrive. Pancakes, bacon, berries, coffee, make it look normal. I stared at that last line. Make it look normal. The word tasted like ash. It was the hardest thing to write, because I knew he would interpret it as surrender. He would think I had finally understood his lesson. But this wasn't surrender. This was the blueprint for an interception, a silent war plan drawn up on a glowing phone screen. I had to set the stage. I had to lure the monster into his comfort zone, right before I pulled the rug out from under him. I knew what I was doing, and the clarity of that plan, that singular goal, kept my hands from shaking. This silence was not submission, it was the loading of a weapon. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost. The air was still thick with the smell of what had started the argument, the burnt rice, which still sat in the pot on the stove, a blackened crust clinging to the stainless steel. I scraped it into the trash with a spatula, the sound loud and grating in the deep silence of the house. I tied the bag, carried it to the bin by the back door, and paused with my hand on the cool metal handle. The moon hung low and orange through the window, casting long, nervous shadows across the tile floor. I thought of my grandmother, June, who used to say, "The kitchen is the heart of the home, Audrey. Feed it love, and it feeds you back." I had fed this kitchen fear in silence for too long. Tonight, I was feeding it a perfect, sugary trap. I opened the pantry. The shelves were always orderly. Clyde insisted on labels facing out, canned goods arranged by height. Tonight, I saw them differently. Pancake mix. Real maple syrup in a glass bottle. Thick-cut bacon from the butcher, farm-fresh eggs, blueberries plump and dusted with frost from the freezer. We had bought them yesterday for a lazy Sunday breakfast that never happened. Now they would serve a higher purpose. I set the cast-iron griddle on the stove and turned the burner to medium-low. While it heated, I whisked the batter in my grandmother June's old ceramic bowl, the one with the hairline crack she'd repaired with superglue and loved decades ago. The scent of vanilla and melted butter rose up, a heavy, sweet incense that fought back against the smell of fear. I laid the bacon in a skillet. The sizzle was a soft, gentle hymn, not the shouting I was used to. I arranged blueberries in a cut glass bowl that had been a wedding gift, oh, the irony of that, and sliced strawberries into perfect fans on a white platter. I toasted thick slices of sourdough and spread them with butter and strawberry jam from the farmer's market. Then, the coffee. I brewed a dark roast in the French press, strong enough to strip paint, just the way Clyde liked it. He loved coffee. He loved routine. And I was giving him the best routine possible. The table was set for 4. Not 2, but 4. 4 white plates, cloth napkins folded into swans, the way June had taught me when I was just 10 years old. Orange juice in a crystal pitcher, catching the first pale hint of dawn. I stepped back and surveyed my work. It looked like forgiveness. It was a lie. At 5 a.m. sharp, I called Phoebe. My fingers were steady, but the knot in my stomach was tightening. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with sleep but sharpening instantly when I whispered, "It happened again, but this time, I'm ready." "Same bruise, Audrey?" she asked, already moving. I heard the rustle of sheets and the jangle of keys on her end. She knew the drill. Same, but no words. "I need you here for the restraining order, and I need you to look impeccable." 10 minutes out. "Stay on the line," Phoebe instructed. Her voice was the anchor I needed. At 5:30 a.m., I ended the call with Phoebe and dialed the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher was calm, professional, taking down the details of the domestic dispute like she was ordering a pizza. Officers Jocelyn and Hayes were en route, ETA 8 minutes. "Ma'am," the dispatcher said, "do not engage with the suspect." Suspect. The word landed like a stone in the still water of my kitchen. I stood at the window and watched the street. The cul-de-sac was silent, porch lights glowing low. Mrs. Estelle's house across the way was dark, but I knew my neighbor was an early riser. At 5:47 a.m., headlights swept the driveway. 2 patrol cars, their approach silent and professional. Phoebe's Prius pulled in behind them. Officer Jocelyn was first through the door, her hand near her holster but not on it. She was shorter than I expected, with kind eyes and a voice like warm tea. "Ma'am, are you injured?" I touched my cheek. "Yes." Officer Hayes, tall and quiet, immediately began photographing the kitchen, the table, the bruise. Phoebe stood beside me, her suit impeccable, already opening her laptop. "Temporary restraining order draft is ready. We file at 8 when the courthouse opens." That's when Clyde appeared at the top of the stairs in his gray sweatpants, hair wild, eyes squinting against the light. He inhaled the delicious scent wafting up the stairwell and smiled, the infuriating, entitled smile of a man who truly believed the world, and his wife, would always reset in his favor. "Pancakes," he said, his voice gravelly with sleep and satisfaction. "Good, you finally understood." He descended slowly, each creaking step a warning I was no longer afraid of. He rounded the corner into the dining room and stopped dead. Officer Jocelyn sat at the table sipping coffee. Officer Hayes stood by the patio door, notepad in hand. And Phoebe, my friend, my lawyer, occupied Clyde's usual seat at the head of the table, her eyes like flint. Clyde's smile evaporated. "What the?" I stepped from the shadow of the kitchen doorway, phone recording in my hand, the bruise livid in the morning light. "Good morning, Clyde. Breakfast is served, but you're not eating with us." Officer Jocelyn stood up immediately. Mr. Thompson, step back. We have a report of assault and battery. You're coming with us. Clyde's gaze darted from the officers to Phoebe and finally landed on me. For the first time in the 10 years we had been together, he looked small. He looked confused, like a spoiled child who couldn't figure out why his toy had finally talked back. The officers moved with choreographed precision. Hayes read Clyde his Miranda rights in a low, steady monotone while Jocelyn gently guided me to the living room couch, away from the breakfast tableau. Phoebe followed, her laptop balanced on one arm, already pulling up the TTRO template. The pancakes cooled, untouched. The maple syrup congealed into amber pools that caught the light like stained glass. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I recounted the evening in meticulous detail. The burned rice that started as a simple mistake. The way Clyde's voice had risen like a storm front, the insults escalating from petty to cruel. The moment his hand connected with my cheek and the world tilted. I described the sound, sharp, intimate, final. The way my ears rang, the metallic taste of fear on my tongue. Phoebe typed every word. Her face was unreadable, professional, except for the muscle jumping rapidly in her jaw. Clyde's protests echoed from the hallway. She's exaggerating. It was mutual. She threw a plate. The officers ignored him. They photographed the bruise under the soft glow of the foyer lamp. They asked me to turn my head left, right, chin up. Each click of the camera felt like another brick in a wall separating my past from my future. When Officer Jocelyn asked if I wanted to press charges, I hesitated for only a second. I looked at Phoebe, I looked at the cooling pancakes, and I looked at the spot where the brick would fly through the window months later. Yes, I said. It was the easiest, clearest word I had ever spoken. Clyde was cuffed, not roughly, but firmly, and led to the patrol car. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Mrs. Estelle, my elderly neighbor, stood openly on her porch in a faded robe, arms crossed like a sentinel. I met her eyes and nodded once. The older woman nodded back, a silent pact of witness. After the cruiser pulled away, Phoebe closed her laptop with a soft snap. You okay? No, I said, but I will be. We ate the pancakes after all, cold but defiant. Officer Jocelyn accepted a plate before leaving, praising the fluffiness with a wry smile. Best arrest breakfast I've ever had, she murmured. Phoebe stayed the day. We boxed Clyde's clothes into black trash bags. We changed the locks with a kit from the hardware store, replacing every single one. We installed the Ring camera I had ordered months ago but never dared to put up. Every task felt ceremonial, like shedding skin I no longer needed. I called my boss, Dennis, at the library. Take the week, he said, listening without interruption. Take 2. Your job is safe. I cried then, quiet tears into my coffee, the steam fogging my glasses. It wasn't about the job, it was about the simple human kindness. Phoebe drove me to the courthouse to file the TTRO. The clerk was kind, handing me tissues and a pen that actually worked. We sat in the fluorescent-lit waiting area among other women with similar paperwork, a sisterhood of survival I never wanted to join, but was grateful to find. When the judge signed the order, 500 feet, no contact, surrender firearms, I felt the first real breath I'd taken in years. Back home, I opened every window. The house smelled like bacon and possibility. The calm lasted maybe 6 hours. That afternoon, while Phoebe was on the phone with the bail bondsman making sure Clyde stayed put for a while, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, check our joint bank account. Clyde had always managed the finances. He handled his salary from his construction company, he handled my library checks, and he handled the small inheritance I got from my aunt. I only had access to a low-limit credit card. I never asked questions. I was too tired, too afraid of the inevitable storm. But now, I was ready to ask questions. I logged into the joint account. I navigated through the statements, my heart sinking with every click. The balance was lower than I expected, alarmingly so. I drilled down into the past 6 months of transactions. I wasn't looking for suspicious dinners or lavish gifts. I was looking for a pattern. And there it was, hidden beneath the noise of utility bills and mortgage payments, a series of large, irregular withdrawals, totaling nearly $50,000. They weren't checks, they were wire transfers labeled obscurely, materials, equipment rental, consulting fee. "Phoebe," I called out. My voice was tight. "You need to see this." She came over and peered at the screen. Her eyebrows rose slowly. "This isn't business, Audrey. This looks like a secret fund, or worse, a failed investment. We tracked one large transfer, a whopping $20,000, to a shell company registered in a different state. It didn't belong to Clyde's construction company. He was draining us," I whispered, the rage finally replacing the fear. "He was setting us up to fail, just in case." I thought of the college fund we were supposed to be building for a future we wouldn't have. It was nearly empty. Phoebe immediately recognized the significance. "This is huge for the divorce proceedings, Audrey. If we can prove he was concealing assets or misusing marital funds, we can argue fault and get a better settlement, especially regarding the house." We immediately began transferring my remaining funds, my small library salary and what was left of my inheritance, to a new, separate bank account at a different branch across town. We rerouted my next paycheck and froze the joint credit cards. Every click, every transfer, felt like cutting a tether. Clyde's name came off the utilities one by one. Electric, water, internet. Each cancellation was a small, satisfying step toward independence. I called my cousin, Marilyn, who lived in Portland. We hadn't spoken properly in months because Clyde had always found ways to monopolize my time. "Marilyn, it happened. But I'm out." "Oh, honey," her voice was thick with concern. I told her about the slap, the pancakes, the arrest, and the $50,000 hole in our bank account. "I need help with the details. I need a place to go if he makes bail." "I'm coming," Marilyn said, not asking, but stating. "I'll book a flight for the weekend. We'll set up a financial shield. And Audrey, you're safe. You did the right thing." Hearing the words financial shield made me feel less like a victim and more like a shareholder taking back her company. This wasn't just about physical safety, it was about economic survival. The fight wasn't over the marriage, it was over the balance sheet, and I was finally ready to fight dirty. Clyde's lawyer, a harried young public defender named Kessler, was doing his best to minimize the situation. He filed a motion claiming I had provoked Clyde by burning dinner, that the bruise was exaggerated, and that the financial withdrawals were simply business expenses related to his side contracting work. 2 weeks after the arrest, we were back in court for the preliminary hearing. I wore the navy blazer Phoebe lent me, my hair pulled back severely with a clip that dug into my scalp, anything to feel professional, armored. Clyde sat at the defense table in a borrowed suit that strained at the shoulders, his eyes bloodshot from nights on his cousin's lumpy couch. The judge, the Honorable Judith Alvarez, had silver streaks in her braid and an expression that suggested she had absolutely no patience for domestic nonsense. She reviewed the filings with a pen poised like a scalpel. My T-Tarot packet was thick, photos from 3:29 a.m., the medical report confirming the contusion and a possible hairline fracture of the zygomatic arch, the text screenshots, and Mrs. Estelle's affidavit. Clyde's side offered his cousin, Tony, who smelled faintly of stale beer, as a character witness, and the claim of provocation. Judge Alvarez raised one eyebrow so high it nearly touched her hairline. I testified first. I described the marriage in calm, measured paragraphs. The good years when Clyde built me a window seat and read me poetry. The gradual shift after his father's funeral when the drinking started. The incidents that escalated from shoves to slaps, culminating in the night of the pancakes. I did not cry. Crying was weakness here. Kessler tried to trip me up. Did you ever hit Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson? Did you threaten his inheritance? No, I stated firmly, leaving it at that. Then, Mrs. Estelle took the stand. She was tiny in a floral dress that smelled of lavender sachets, but her voice was steady despite her age. She played the video on the courtroom screen, the one from the camera her late husband, a self-proclaimed paranoid, had installed. The video was grainy, but clear. Clyde's raised hand. My flinch. The impact. The timestamp. And my figure, resigned, walking away without a word. The judge watched without expression, but her pen moved furiously across her notepad. Phoebe then shifted the focus to the financial deception. Mr. Thompson, can you explain this $20,000 transfer on June 15 to a company that is not affiliated with your primary employer? Clyde sputtered, it was an opportunity. A contract I was scouting. I didn't want to worry Audrey with the details. Was your wife aware that her inheritance money was being used to fund this opportunity? Phoebe pressed. No, he mumbled. The cross-examination by Kessler tried to paint me as dramatic, as having anger issues myself. Phoebe objected smoothly, relevance, speculation, and the objections were sustained each time. Clyde testified last. He was contrite, his voice cracking like a teenager's. I love my wife. It was a mistake. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything. The judge looked him over. Mr. Thompson, have you started anger management? No, Your Honor, but... Enough, Judge Alvarez interrupted. The gavel hit the wood, not loudly, but with authority. Ruling, the TTRO was extended for 6 months. Clyde was ordered to complete a 52-week batterer's intervention program certified by the state. Crucially, the marital home was awarded to me pending the final divorce proceedings. No contact, including third parties. All firearms to be surrendered within 48 hours. Outside in the marble hallway, Phoebe hugged me so hard my ribs creaked. Phase 1 complete, she whispered. Now we divorce his ass. The euphoria of the courtroom victory lasted exactly 4 hours. That evening, I was finally starting to feel safe enough to unpack Marilyn's suitcase from Portland when a crash erupted from the living room. It sounded like a gunshot. Glass exploded everywhere. Shards covered the oriental rug and the furniture. A brick sat in the middle of the mess, wrapped crudely in newspaper. My breath seized in my throat. I grabbed the baseball bat I had placed under the bed, moving on instinct. The next morning, at 6:12 a.m., the word was scrawled in red spray paint across the driveway, still wet and glistening in the morning dew, C*T. The letters were sloppy, dripping down onto the concrete. I immediately called Officer Jocelyn. She and Hayes came back. They dusted for prints on the brick, finding none. Jocelyn increased the drive-bys to twice nightly. The fear was back, sharp and hot, but it was now laced with pure, toxic fury. Clyde had not understood. He had not accepted the court's ruling. He was escalating. I refused to move. The house was mine now, temporarily, and I would not surrender my space to his rage. I installed motion lights that bathed the yard in a blinding white glare. I reinforced the windows with security film, making them harder to smash. The calls and texts started, not from his number, that was blocked, but from burner apps and unfamiliar emails. They were aggressive, crude, and deeply personal. One text from an unknown number read, "Your lawyer says you're lying about the money. You can't keep my house. I will expose you." Then, the psychological warfare began. A text arrived with a screenshot of an old text I had sent Clyde years ago, detailing a petty fight I'd had with my sister. "Think your library friends will like seeing this? I have all your secrets." He wasn't just threatening me, he was threatening my carefully constructed life. I screenshotted and forwarded everything to Phoebe and Officer Jocelyn. "Document everything," Phoebe advised, her voice grim. "The pattern matters." Every threat, every violation, every piece of paint. I found the lawyer Phoebe recommended for the divorce, a shark in pearls named Joyce Wu. We met over coffee at the corner cafe with the good croissants. Community property state, Joyce said, stirring 3 sugars into her espresso, her eyes sharp. But fault matters. Assault, stalking, property damage, that's all fault. We document everything. I opened a new bank account, rerouted my remaining library salary, and officially changed the beneficiary on my life insurance from Clyde to my cousin, Marilyn. Every administrative task was an act of defiance. Clyde, through Kessler, fought back with desperate claims. I was hiding assets from my minimal art sales. I was alienating his affections. He demanded half the house immediately. Joyce countered with the police reports, the brick photos, the red paint still staining the concrete, and the receipts from the burner phone apps we traced. The fight had moved out of the kitchen and into the filing cabinet. It was ugly, expensive, and necessary. The more he fought, the more evidence he created. And I was determined to collect every single piece. The support group, facilitated by Naomi, before she was Naomi, she was just a woman who had been there, became my anchor. 12 women in a church basement, folding chairs in a circle. I spoke last one evening, recounting the pancakes, the arrest, the brick. The room was silent, then filled with nods and murmured, "I've been there." Naomi recommended a trauma specialist, Dr. Singh, who smelled of sandalwood. In the first session, I talked for 40 minutes straight about the pancake breakfast. How the smell of bacon still made my stomach clench. How I couldn't eat blueberries without flashing back to Officer Jocelyn's kind, professional face. Art became oxygen. I painted the brick incident, shards of glass catching light like prisms, the ugly word morphing into warrior in dripping letters that looked like blood but were actually cadmium red. I titled it Shattered, Not Broken. Then, Miriam reached out. The ex-girlfriend from 5 years before me. Phoebe vetted her through mutual contacts, she was legitimate. We arranged a meeting at a neutral cafe with outdoor seating and plenty of witnesses. Miriam was smaller than I remembered from old photos Clyde had deleted, but her eyes were fierce. She was quiet, ordering a black coffee, but her voice was steady when she began. "He did the same to me," Miriam said, stirring her coffee slowly. Isolated me from friends, hit me when I burned toast, apologized with jewelry I couldn't wear to work because it left bruises. I felt a cold confirmation settle in my bones. I wasn't the first, but I would be the last. I left when he put me in the hospital with a concussion, she continued, her voice catching for the first time. I dropped the custody charges because he threatened my sister's kids. We compared timelines on napkins. The overlap in patterns was chilling, the charm, the control, the explosion, the honeymoon phase, repeat. Miriam had kept everything, medical records, old texts, and a restraining order that expired when she moved states. She pulled a worn manila envelope from her bag. Inside were copies of her hospital intake photos, black eye, split lip, and a formal diagnosis of a concussion. She also produced a small, microcassette tape. "This is old," she explained, her face tight. "I recorded him once, right after." His voice, apologizing, promising to enroll in therapy he never went to. It proves prior knowledge of the behavior. I'm willing to testify in the divorce and the criminal case. This wasn't just my story anymore. This was a pattern. This was evidence that spanned years and victims. It gave my fight a new dimension, a sense of historic justice. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting to shut down his cycle. "Miriam," I said, leaning forward. "Thank you. You just gave us everything." With Marilyn now moved in temporarily, the house felt safer, but my sense of paranoia was growing. The motion lights would flash at 2 a.m. sometimes, and there was never anything there. Or was there? Marilyn, who had worked in tech, was the one who noticed. She was trying to set up a new smart speaker when she noticed an unusual network signal. "That's weird, AUD," she said, tapping her laptop screen. There's a hidden Wi-Fi network broadcasting from inside the house. It's got a strong signal, but it's not connecting to our router. We called Phoebe immediately. She suggested we hire a private investigator, Leo, to do a sweep. Leo came, silent and methodical, his equipment humming. He found it in the crawl space above the kitchen. Not just one, but 3 tiny, wireless spy cameras, professionally installed. Clyde had put them there before the night of the pancakes, likely during a weekend project he'd insisted on. They're broadcasting on a separate network, recording directly to a cloud server, Leo explained, pointing to the wires. He's been watching the house, watching you, since before the restraining order was even filed. The revelation made my stomach turn. Every private moment, every tear, every conversation with Phoebe, every time I touched my bruise, he had watched it all. He wasn't just violating the order, he was laughing at it. We have to get the data, Phoebe declared. This is conspiracy to commit stalking. This changes the criminal charges entirely. Leo couldn't just cut the power. We needed the cloud access. We needed the footage proving he was actively monitoring the house after the TTRO was served. Phoebe and I devised a dangerous plan. We couldn't let Clyde know we knew. We need a full system shutdown, then we access the network and download the server log, Leo instructed. The only time he'll be offline long enough is during his mandatory check-in at the intervention facility tomorrow morning. It's an 8-hour window. The next morning, while Clyde was signing in for his first batterer's intervention session, Phoebe, Marilyn, and Leo were in my attic, sweating under the harsh work light. My job was to sit downstairs, look normal, and run interference if anyone showed up. The tension was suffocating. Every hammer tap from the attic sounded like a gunshot. Finally, Phoebe came down the stairs, dust on her tailored suit. She held a memory stick. We got it, Audrey. 8 months of footage. It shows him installing them, it shows him logging in from his cousin's duplex, and it shows him watching you. We also found a massive cache of texts on the main camera's server, including instructions to Jake, an associate from his construction company. She scrolled through a spreadsheet on her laptop. The texts were crude, direct, and provided the financial paper trail we needed. Clyde to Jake, scare her. Mess up the yard. Make her drop the suit. $500 now. $500 after. The text was timestamped 3 hours before the brick flew through the window. The relief that washed over me was a physical wave. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just exaggerating. He was a criminal mastermind in his own twisted world. Phoebe called Officer Jocelyn immediately. We have the footage and the texts confirming a conspiracy to commit stalking and criminal mischief. The criminal charges were now indisputable. The game was over. I had him. The evidence was delivered. Jocelyn and her partner moved quickly, getting a warrant for Clyde's phone and a deeper look into the associate, Jake, a former employee who had a history of bar fights and petty theft. The police tracked Jake down at a dive bar off Highway 12. He was still wearing the same black hoodie from the security footage we found. He lawyered up fast, but the initial search of his phone was a gold mine. The texts from Clyde matched ours perfectly. The bank record showed the transfers of $500. The warrant was issued for Clyde. He was arrested at his cousin's duplex, reportedly screaming about his innocence to the neighbors filming on their phones. Bail was immediately denied. Flight risk. Violation pattern. Conspiracy to commit stalking. He was remanded, finally, in county jail. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just felt the world settle back onto its correct axis for the first time in years. I had won the high-stakes game of surveillance and betrayal. I had countered his violence with strategy, his manipulation with evidence. The court date for the criminal trial was set for 8 weeks out. I was safe now, physically safe, but the emotional cleanup was just beginning. I spent the next 2 days in my empty studio, cleaning the dust left by Leo's equipment. I was exhausted, but strangely focused. I was preparing my final impact statement. I wrote it longhand in a leather journal Marilyn gave me, then typed it, then rewrote it until every single word was a blade of truth, ready for the courtroom. I practiced it aloud to my empty studio, my voice echoing off the canvases drying on every surface. The words felt like armor. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I painted until dawn. A phoenix rising from pancake batter, wings made of a spatula and hope, beak open in a silent scream of triumph. I titled it Breakfast of Freedom and hung it, still wet, above the fireplace. I knew my story had reached so many of you. I know you're rooting for me, for the part of you that's tired of being silent. And I need to know you're still here with me for the final act. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you are amazing, and I understand that you are accompanying me throughout this journey. Your help is a tremendous encouragement, cheering me on. Please comment the number 1 so I can recognize you, and now, listen to me continue my story. The courtroom was packed. The local paper was covering the domestic violence spike after the viral TikTok of the brick incident. I wore a navy suit, a power color, Joyce advised, and my hair was down for the first time in months, curls tamed into a low bun. Joyce, my divorce lawyer, sat beside me, but the prosecution was handled by the state attorney. They laid out the case like a crime novel: assault, stalking, conspiracy. Miriam testified in person this time, her voice steady and clear. She described the pattern, the concussions, the threats to her family, and the fear that silenced her for years. The prosecution played the audio from her microcassette tape, forcing Clyde to hear his own voice from 5 years ago, contrite and lying. Estelle, my neighbor, played the pancake video again, narrating it like a nature documentary. Here, you see the subject, Clyde Thompson, exhibiting supreme arrogance before entering the dining room. Jake, the associate, took a plea bargain, 18 months in testimony against Clyde for a reduced sentence. His testimony was brutal, detailing how Clyde had planned the break-in, instructing him to make it look like a random robbery but to specifically send the message mine with the refrigerator magnets. Clyde's defense claimed I orchestrated everything for the house, that the bruise was makeup, that the brick was self-inflicted. The jury, however, had already seen the urgent care x-rays and the extensive evidence of Clyde's financial manipulation and surveillance. Then came my turn. I walked to the stand in heels that clicked like punctuation. I met Clyde's eyes, they were empty now, like a house with the lights off, and I spoke, not to the jury, but to him. I loved you once, Clyde. I believed in us. I believed love could fix anything, even fists. But love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't hire friends to terrorize. I am not your possession. I am a person, and I choose freedom. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 12 minutes. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Felony assault, stalking, conspiracy. I didn't stay to watch the bailiffs lead him away in cuffs. I walked out into sunlight that felt like forgiveness, the culmination of every tiny act of courage since 3:17 a.m. that morning. The next month was paperwork and peace. The criminal sentencing was delayed, but the civil proceedings for the divorce moved quickly. The final divorce hearing was conducted via video call, with Clyde attending from county jail. He was pale, thinner, his eyes downcast. His lawyer, Kessler, seemed exhausted. Joyce was relentless, using the criminal verdict as leverage. She meticulously documented the fault, the assault, the stalking, the misuse of my inheritance and the depletion of the college fund. Judge Alvarez, having witnessed the entire drama, was decisive. She awarded me the house, all contents, and a permanent restraining order until further review. Clyde received supervised visitation with the furniture he no longer owned. The first act of celebration was small. I hosted a housewarming the weekend after. Library staff, my support group, Marilyn, Estelle, and even Officer Jocelyn, off-duty in jeans and a blouse, came. We ate pancakes, blueberry, chocolate chip, banana, walnut. No apologies were needed for the mess. Someone started a conga line through the kitchen. I laughed until my sides hurt. My art career immediately launched. The local gallery owner, who had initially seen my work leaning against a staff room wall, gave me a feature wall. My painting Shattered, Not Broken sold first to a women's shelter for their lobby. Then 3 more sold, providing enough for a down payment on Clyde's share of the house, should the judge have ruled differently. Joyce looked over the numbers. He tried to claim alienation of affection and demanded spousal support. We got you the house, the custody of your future, and a lifetime of peace. I started dating Alex, the children's librarian with kind eyes and terrible puns, who quoted Where the Wild Things Are during staff meetings. Our first date was mini golf. He let me win, then bought me ice cream with sprinkles. It was simple, and it was the world. My life became a testament to deliberate reconstruction. I transformed Marilyn's temporary guest room into a studio with skylights and a sink for cleaning brushes. The first night I painted until 4 a.m., I fell asleep on the futon with cadmium yellow still under my fingernails. I was offered a promotion at the library, assistant director, which came with a corner office and a plant I named Frederick. My salary jumped, providing a final layer of financial independence. I led teen writing workshops, curated a display on women's history, and lived the life Clyde had once mocked. Self-defense classes with Naomi became sacred, Tuesday and Thursday nights. I learned to jab, to yell no, until my throat was raw, to break holds with leverage instead of strength. The first time I successfully flipped the instructor, a former Marine named Carla with a buzz cut, I hooped so loud the class applauded. I bought my first pair of boxing wraps, bright teal, and hung them on a hook by the door like a medal. Miriam testified in a deposition via Zoom from her new home in Colorado. Her records matched my patterns exactly, same cycle, same apologies, same escalation. Clyde's team tried to discredit her as a bitter ex, but the judge watched the footage of Miriam's hospital intake photos, black eye, split lip, and her expression said everything. One night, I woke to scratching at the back door. My heart hammered, and I grabbed the bat, calling 911, flipping on every light. It was a raccoon, fat and unafraid, staring at me through the glass. I laughed until I cried, then cried until Marilyn found me on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m., eating cold pancakes straight from the fridge. Marilyn moved in permanently, taking the guest room with her lavender diffuser and loud laughter. We cooked, painted, binge-watched old movies where the heroine always got away. Normalcy as armor. The gallery show was a success. My painting Breakfast of Freedom was the centerpiece, and it was purchased by a collector who donated it back to the shelter. I produced 12 pieces in 3 months, working until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned. The art sales funded therapy, security upgrades, and the final lawyer fees. I had paid my way out. 10 years passed like brushstrokes, deliberate, colorful, irreversible. My house became a haven. The kitchen where violence once lived now hosted brunches for the support group every third Sunday. Laughter echoed off the sage green walls painted with Marilyn's help. My memoir, Pancakes and Power, hit indie bestseller lists and was optioned for a limited series. The producer wanted to cast me as a consultant. I lived it, I said. I don't need to watch it. The library expanded under my direction. I fundraised for a teen safe space in the basement, beanbags, charging stations, a mural of constellations painted by the Astronomy Club. Estelle volunteered twice a week, reading to toddlers with the same steady voice that once testified in court. Miriam married a gentle architect named David, sending holiday cards with baby photos. We met annually for coffee, toasting survival with lattes and lemon bars. Clyde served 20 months in a low-security facility upstate. He wrote letters from prison, apologies, self-reflection, promises of change. I read them once, filed them in a box labeled for historians, and forgave him in the way one forgives a storm for passing. Trust was earned in ashes, and his were cold. Alex proposed on the rooftop where Clyde once had, but with fairy lights strung by the library teens and a ring etched with a tiny open book. We married in the library after hours, surrounded by shelves and friends. Marilyn was maid of honor in teal. Naomi officiated, her voice cracking when she said, "Love, honor, and pancakes." We bought the house next door, knocked down the fence, and made a compound, a studio for me with skylights and a kiln, and a workshop for Alex's woodworking. We adopted 2 dogs, a rescue mutt named Rosa, for my grandmother, June, and a 3-legged cat named Brick, who ruled the sunbeams. My art evolved. International shows in New York, London, Tokyo. A piece in the Smithsonian, shattered, not broken, 2, the brick rebuilt into a mosaic heart with 312 pieces of glass, 1 for every woman who attended my first support group. Paint your truth, I told the young artists I mentored. Someone needs to see it to believe they can leave. The pancake breakfast became legend. Every year on the anniversary of the arrest, I cooked for the shelter. Stacks of fluffy discs, bacon curling like smiles, berries bursting with summer. One year, a teenager with a split lip asked, "How did you know it was time?" I flipped a pancake, watched it bubble golden. When making breakfast for my abuser felt like serving my own prison sentence, when I realized the smell of bacon made me flinch instead of smile. She nodded, took a plate, and wrote her number on the shelter's contact board. My phone buzzed constantly now, texts from unknown numbers. "Thank you. You saved me. I left today because of your book. My daughter is safe because of your mural." I saved them in a folder labeled Hearts Mended. On the 10th anniversary, I returned to the City Gallery for a retrospective. My first bruise painting hung beside the newest. A woman at a table laden with pancakes, facing an empty chair, sunrise streaming through the window and golden bars. The woman's hand reached for a fork, steady, unafraid. Title: The Morning After. Critics called it triumphant. I called it Tuesday. I locked up after the reception, walked home through autumn leaves that crunched like applause. Alex waited on the porch with coffee and Rosa the dog, tail wagging like a metronome. Brick the cat watched from the windowsill, unimpressed. In the kitchen, I started batter, not for apology, but for celebration. I added extra vanilla, a pinch of cinnamon, blueberries that burst like tiny suns. Alex set the table for 2, cloth napkins folded into swans because he'd watched YouTube tutorials. We ate in silence at first, then talked about the teen's latest mural, about the shelter's new therapy dog, about the way Rosa had stolen an entire pancake off the counter and looked proud. When the plates were empty, I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the cul-de-sac where it all began. Estelle's porch light glowed across the street. A new family lived in Clyde's cousin's old duplex, kids on scooters, a mom planting tulips. The driveway where the red paint once bled was now a chalk masterpiece of rainbows and hopscotch. I raised my coffee mug to the night. "To second breakfasts," I said. Alex clinked his against mine. "And third and fourth and every damn one after." The cycle was broken. The table was yours. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and safety. And the pancakes were perfect. As the story comes to a close, we are reminded of the profound strength it takes to reclaim one's life from the grip of fear and pain. This journey is not just about survival, it's about transformation, about rising from the ashes to rebuild a life filled with hope, love, and purpose. Audrey's story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, there is always a spark of resilience waiting to ignite. Her courage to break free, her determination to fight for justice, and her ability to create beauty out of brokenness serve as a testament to the boundless power of the human spirit. This is more than a story of overcoming adversity, it's a call to recognize our own worth and to stand firm against anything or anyone who seeks to diminish it. Audrey's journey reminds us that no one deserves to live in fear or silence, and that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but of incredible strength. It's a reminder that healing is possible, and that every act of defiance against oppression is a step toward freedom. What does this story mean to you? How has it inspired you to think about your own strength or the struggles of those around you? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this story resonated with you. Let's continue to spread hope and remind each other that we are never alone.